Did you know who is watching me from my back door? Every place has its secrets. Some are harmless. Others are the kind that keep you up at night. The stories you're about to hear are real, taken from people who swore they'd never speak of them again. But they did. And now, you're next in line to know the truth. I used to live in this tiny studio on the top floor of a weathered old building in Chicago. Nothing fancy, just a single room, a kitchenette, and a creaky bathroom door that never shut quite right. But it was cheap, close to work, and all I could afford after graduating college with a mountain of student debt and barely enough in my account to cover pizza. What made the place feel especially boxed in was the single window facing a narrow alley. Across the gap was another building, nearly a mirror image of mine. The space between us was just wide enough for a car to crawl through, and during the day, it was gloomy. At night, it became a slab of pitch-black emptiness. But that alley, it never bothered me at first. I was bartending at the time, working nights at a lounge up on the north side. I'd usually get home around 2:30, maybe closer to 3 a.m. I'd heat something quick, scroll my phone, and crash. Then, one night about a month after I moved in, something felt off. I had just walked in, kicked off my shoes, and flicked on the overhead light when I caught a flicker of motion in the window across the way. Just a twitch in the curtain, maybe a blink and you miss it kind of thing. I froze mid-step, staring, but the window was still. Curtains motionless, black as a cave inside. I brushed it off. A gust of wind, maybe. Nothing unusual. But the next night, it happened again. The instant I turned on my lights, that same curtain shifted. Only this time, I saw it clearly, a hand. Just for a second. Pulling the fabric aside like someone was peeking out. I couldn't see who it was. Their apartment was completely dark, like always. But that movement, it sent a chill down my spine. Here's the thing that really got me. In all my time living there, I'd never seen a light on in that window. Not once. I figured the place was empty. That night, I barely slept. Over the next week, I started keeping track. And it wasn't a fluke. Every night, as soon as I came home and turned on a light, any light, the curtain across the alley would part slightly. Same slow movement, same eerie pause, same silence. But only when I turned on the light. I started experimenting. Some nights I left everything dark, just sat in silence by the window. And on those nights, nothing. Not a flicker. Not a sound. But the moment I turned on a lamp, that curtain moved. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone just liked looking out the window. Maybe they were night owls like me. But the timing, the precision, it was too perfect, too intentional. Eventually, I asked my landlord about the unit across the alley. He raised an eyebrow and told me that the apartment had been vacant for months. Nobody lived there. I pushed him for details, but he just laughed it off, saying I was probably spooking myself. I considered going to the police. But what would I tell them? Hey, I think someone's watching me from a dark window in an apartment that's supposed to be empty? They'd think I was crazy. But something inside me knew I wasn't imagining it. Then it got worse. One night, I came home later than usual, around 4 a.m. The bar had hosted a private party, and cleanup took forever. I was half asleep, just fumbling with my keys, when I noticed something wedged in the doorframe. I figured it was a flyer or some junk. But when I pulled it out, I realized it was a crumpled piece of paper. One word was scrawled on it in shaky pen. Hey. I felt the blood drain from my face. Immediately, I turned and ran to the window. The alley was as dark as ever. The curtain across the way was shut. I didn't wait. I called Jamie, my closest friend across town. I was panicking and rambling, but she told me to get my stuff and come over. I grabbed a backpack, threw in the essentials, and got out of that place fast. The next day, I wasn't polite about it. I demanded my landlord show me the inside of that apartment. He hesitated, but eventually, he brought the key. When he opened the door, I got hit with a wall of stale air. The place was cold, dusty, and completely bare. No furniture. No signs of recent living. Floorboards groaned with every step like the building itself wanted to scream. But in the back room, the one facing my apartment, was a single metal folding chair. It was sitting dead center in front of the window. That image. I can't get it out of my head. The police were called. They swept the place. I think they dusted for prints, maybe even took the chair. But nothing ever came of it. No suspect. No explanation. Just the knowledge that some stranger had been inside that locked, empty apartment. And they had been watching me. The worst part. I'll never know how long it went on. Weeks. Months. Was it someone with a key? A squatter? A complete stranger who came and went in the shadows? I moved out that same week. To this day, I still wonder, what if I had never found that note? What if I'd turned my light on just one more night? Whoever they were, they wanted me to know they were there. And sometimes, late at night, I still wake up with the feeling that a pair of eyes is on me, watching, from a window I can't see. When I was 12, my family packed up and left city life behind. We moved to a quiet patch of land deep in rural Oregon, miles away from the closest town. It was the kind of place where the silence wasn't peaceful. It was isolating, eerie, the kind of quiet that made you feel like someone or something could be watching. Our new home was an old wooden house from the 1940s, with warped floorboards, creaky doors, and a musty attic that smelled like forgotten decades. Out back, about 30 feet from the rear porch, sat an old shed. The thing looked like it had been forgotten by time, its walls leaning, its padlock rusted, its inside crammed with dusty tools and piles of junk the previous owner had left behind. My dad always said he'd get around to clearing it out. He never did. At first, life there was uneventful. Isolated, but uneventful. But that changed one night. It was a school night, almost midnight. I was curled up under the covers with a flashlight and a book I wasn't supposed to be reading, when I heard our dog Max barking like crazy. Now, Max wasn't the kind of dog to bark at shadows. He was gentle, but sharp. When he barked like that, it meant something was wrong. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. Max was standing in the yard, teeth bared, barking furiously in the direction of the shed. The motion light above the back door had flicked on, casting long, warped shadows over the grass. But the space near the shed? It was still dark. Too dark. I stared for a while. There was no movement. Just Max, barking at the void. Eventually, he calmed. I went back to bed. But the next morning, we found something that made my stomach turn. Boot prints. Deep, heavy prints in the dirt, leading from the back of the house straight to the shed and nowhere else. No exit trail. Just a path going in. My dad brushed it off, saying it was probably a passerby or maybe a lost hiker. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. In the following weeks, Max kept barking at the shed. Always at night. Always toward that same patch of darkness. We'd run to the windows, flick on lights, sometimes even step outside, but we never saw anyone. Still, every time, the footprints returned. Same direction. Same pattern. It's never out. Then, one night, something happened that made my blood run cold. It was around 2 a.m. I woke up suddenly, not from a dream, but from the distinct sound of crunching gravel. Footsteps, just outside my window. I didn't move. I held my breath and listened. The steps paused, then started again. This time moving toward the shed. I mustered the courage to lift the blinds just slightly, and at that exact moment, the motion light near the back porch turned on. And there he was. A tall man standing beside the shed door. His coat looked filthy, gray, stained with who knows what. I couldn't see his face, shadows swallowed his features, but he was standing perfectly still. Watching. Then the light clicked off, and he disappeared into darkness. I backed away in panic and rushed to wake my parents. My dad grabbed his rifle and stormed outside, but the man was already gone. The only thing left behind were fresh boot prints leading straight to the shed once again. This time, my dad decided to open it. He unlocked the rusty padlock and yanked the door open with a loud creak. All we saw were the same piles of junk, rusted tools, broken shelves, old tarps. Nothing else. Still, he added a new lock, reinforced the door, and assured me it was all under control. For a while, it was. Then Max disappeared. We searched for hours, even through the trees, along the road, knocking on neighbors' doors. Nothing. Not a single trace. No barking. No collar. Just silence. That night, sleep was impossible. I kept thinking about that shed. The man. The footsteps. And Max. Around 3 a.m., I heard the back door creak open. I jumped out of bed, but my dad was already awake, standing in the hallway with his rifle in hand. We moved quietly to the back of the house and peeked out the window. The motion light flickered on again, and there he was, the man. When I was 12, my family left behind the suburbs and moved out to the middle of nowhere deep in the Oregon wilderness. Our new home sat on a stretch of land surrounded by thick pine forest. The nearest town was a good 20 miles out, and at night, the silence would settle in so heavy, it felt unnatural. The house was old. Real old. Built sometime in the 1940s, creaky floorboards, narrow hallways, an attic that groaned when the wind picked up. But the thing that always stood out to me was the shed. It sat alone about 30 feet from our back door. Run down, slanted, and crammed with forgotten junk from whoever lived there before us. My dad had plans to clean it out, but like most plans, it got pushed off. Indefinitely. None of us went near it. Not really. But then, things started to change. It was a weekday night, almost midnight, and I was under my blanket, flashlight in hand, finishing the last chapter of a book I probably shouldn't have been reading. That's when I heard our dog, Max, barking like he'd lost his mind. Now, Max was a sweetheart golden retriever, always wagging his tail, but when he barked like that, something was off. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the window. He was facing the shed, teeth bared, barking like he saw something I couldn't. The motion light by the back porch had kicked on, casting these long, stretched shadows across the lawn. I stared into the dark, but saw nothing, no movement, no shape. Just Max barking into the void. Eventually, he settled. I went back to bed. But I didn't forget. The next morning, we found deep footprints in the dirt between the house and the shed. Heavy. Humans. They stopped right at the shed door. And that's it. My dad brushed it off. Said it could have been a lost hiker or maybe some drifter cutting through. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. In the days that followed, Max barked again. And again. Always at the shed. Always at night. And every time we checked, no one there. But the footprints, they kept showing up. Always fresh. Always leading to the shed. Never away. Then came the night that still gives me chills. It was past 2 in the morning when I woke up to the crunch of gravel, slow, steady footsteps right outside my window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The steps stopped. Then they started again, heading toward the shed. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. Right then, the motion sensor flicked on. And that's when I saw him. Tall. Slouched. Standing by the shed door. He was wearing a dirty gray coat, the kind you see on people who've lived too long in the cold. His face was buried in the shadows. And then the light went out. I stumbled back from the window, heart racing, and ran to wake my parents. My dad grabbed his rifle and stormed out the back. But by the time he got there, the man was gone. More footprints. Fresh. Leading up to the shed. This time, Dad unlocked it. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but the usual junk. Rusty saws, bent nails, old tarps. Still, Dad replaced the lock with a brand new one and double-checked the doors. For a while things went quiet. Then Max vanished. We searched everywhere through the woods, down the road, knocking on doors. No barking. No collar. Nothing. I kept telling myself he got lost, that he'd come back. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid there thinking about the shed, about the man, about Max. Then, just after 3 a.m., I heard the back door creak open. I jumped out of bed. My dad was already in the hallway, rifle in hand, eyes wide. We moved to the back window and peeked out. The light flickered on, and there he was. The man again. Only this time, he was holding something. In one hand, a long knife. In the other, Max's collar. I felt the air drain out of my lungs. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. It was like something reached inside and twisted my insides into knots. Dad burst through the door, shouting, rifle raised, but the man didn't hesitate. He vanished into the woods like he belonged there. The police came. They searched the area, brought dogs, flashlights, and the whole 9 yards. They didn't find him. But what they did find was worse. Inside the shed, the floor had been swept clean. In the dirt were strange carvings, symbols, some kind of ritualistic design scratched into the ground. And in the corner, a pile of bones. Small ones. Animal, they said. I still pray they were. But that wasn't the end of it. Behind a hidden panel in the shed wall, the officers found a backpack. Inside, wallets, watches, tattered clothing, none of it ours. Belongings from someone else. Maybe from more than one person. The most disturbing part? A notebook. Filled with pages of frantic scribbles, cryptic drawings of houses, people, eyes. Watching. Always watching. It felt like a message. Like a twisted warning. Like we were just the next family in a long list he'd been watching. They bagged everything. Took it all. That night, while we packed to leave, I looked out my bedroom window one last time. Police tape fluttered around the shed, the motion light long dead. But just past the tree line, maybe 10 feet into the dark, I saw a face. Just for a second. Then it was gone. I screamed for my dad. Told him I saw him again by the trees. He didn't hesitate. Grabbed his rifle and ran out screaming into the woods, firing into the night. I think that was the moment my dad snapped, realizing we were being hunted. Stalked. Driven out of our home like prey. He wanted to kill that man. And I don't blame him. We left that house a few days later and moved closer to town, somewhere safer. But sometimes at night, I still hear Max barking in my dreams. Still see the shed. I still feel the eyes. Watching.